Morning, guys. Hope you are all good. And sorry at my lack of speed when it comes to getting this webinar done, but here we are, and I'm going to go through calorie ranges today. So we're going to cover what they are, why they're good, and how and when do I use them. Now, if you currently don't have a calorie range target, don't stress. You probably, you will be given one at some point. The likelihood is that if you don't have a calorie range target at the moment, it's either because you're fairly new to this process or you just work better knowing sort of like where you stand, and we just haven't implemented one for you yet. So if you are like, what the fuck, I don't have a calorie range, why isn't she giving one to me? Don't stress, you will get one at one point, probably. It's just that I don't want to overload you with too much information. This is kind of like phase 2 of nutritional learning, essentially. So what are they? So for a bit of context, in a normal life situation, whether you're tracking or not, you will never eat the same amount of calories on a daily basis. And like that could be like, even with the most accurate tracking, obviously, you don't track your veg, so you might have different amounts of veg. You're always going to have days where you're not as hungry. You have social events, that kind of thing. So in this like process, and also in a real life world, like you won't eat the same amount of calories on a daily basis, and that's a good thing. Like you shouldn't necessarily eat the same amount of calories every day. Calorie ranges are essentially designed to reflect like a real world situation, and we know like doing a process like this, the closer it is to a real life situation, the easier it is then for you to maintain your progress the rest of your life. So they're essentially an alternative to having a very specific calorie goal. So for instance, like at one point you might have had a calorie goal that looks like this. A calorie range goal would look a little something like this. So it's essentially giving you like either some flexibility in terms of eating more food, and also accounting for days where you might not be so hungry. And then in terms of the macros, it will just be like the protein target, and then you have flexibility on carbs and fats. Essentially, it doesn't matter what carbs and fats you have with that. Obviously it just matters that you have a minimum of 40 grams of fat. Sorry, you can hear the dog playing with his Kong in the background. That's what a calorie range goal would look like, essentially. So why are they good? So there's loads of benefits to having this. I think one of the main things is that it can make tracking calories a slightly healthier experience, in that it isn't quite so obsessive, because you're not hyper-focusing on hitting a specific calorie target and then potentially feeling negative towards yourself, the tracking in general, or what you've eaten when you go, or when you have an opportunity to, when you go over your calories, or you have a situation where you've gone over your calories for whatever reason. It's basically just giving you like wider goalposts to work with, and it's just kind of like providing you with a bit more of a safety net in terms of like, remembering that nutrition isn't meant to be perfect, and that is kind of allowing you for those like consistent but imperfect actions if they arise. And like psychologically, like if you think you failed, like I did a post yesterday about going over your calories, actually, like psychologically, like if you think you've failed, you're more likely to give up. If you've got more space to accommodate your emotions and behavior, it actually makes, like, not that obviously eating more calories is a failure by any sense, but like if you like a situation comes up and you have to buy like all of your meals on the road, for example, and they're all quite high calorie, like you're not going to feel like you've failed the day because you've gone over your specific calorie goal. Like you're more likely to cut yourself a bit of slack. And, if you cut yourself some slack, you're more likely to be consistent and not give up. Bear with me 1 second, I just need to let the dog in. Okay, so that's the first benefit. The second benefit is it's going to make you a lot more in tune with your hunger cues and your fueling needs. So there are always going to be days where you want to eat more food, and there's always going to be days when you want to eat less food as well. I'll cover these in the next couple of slides. But being in tune and having an understanding of what and when these situations might arise is super important for the rest of your life, because, essentially, like, that's what you're going to need to, the thought processes you're going to have to think through for the rest of your life, in terms of, like, deciding what your activities around how many calories you eat are. And they're going to come up on a daily basis, and you should be thinking about them on a daily basis, i.e. what have I got going on today? What are my fueling needs? Have I got a long day at work? Therefore, do I need more calories? Like, do you know what I mean? So it's things like that. This is also a really good way of like helping with intuitive eating as well, because one of the main parts of intuitive eating is like being being in tune with your hunger cues, and like deciding what your fueling needs are, and then obviously making a decision around that. So yeah, it really complements intuitive eating. Okay, next up, it allows for greater flexibility. So obviously, as I've just mentioned, like there are always going to be situations where you need to eat more food or be a little bit more flexible. Things like social events, that kind of thing. And having nutritional flexibility and understanding that you have nutritional flexibility, as I mentioned, with not feeling like you're failing, is really important for adherence, because you're more likely to stick to it if you know that you've got like slightly more or slightly less intense, like scary sort of things that you need to aim for. And ultimately, being too rigid with nutrition, why we say that restrictive diets don't work is because the more you feel restricted, the more you're going to want to rebel. So this is kind of like counterbalancing those times where, like, for instance, let's say you've got really bad period cravings, you're like, I can't honor those cravings because like it's going to screw over my calorie deficit. But then like they get too much and you just hate being told that you're like, why should I feel like I have to say no? It's my life. You only live once. And therefore you're more likely to want to rebel. So it just kind of gives you that, like, those options and that flexibility. And then finally, it cultivates your confidence in sort of deciding to actively eat more calories. Like, I've touched on this before. I've done a webinar about it. Like, deciding to eat more food can be an anxious experience. And there's always going to be times in your life when it happens. Like, it's completely inescapable. And, whether it's planned, i.e. like a meal out, or whether it's unplanned, you're always going to be making that decision yourself. Like, it's going to be a conscious decision. So you need to be comfortable with it. And having the range there will push you to think about these decisions mindfully, i.e., what are the logical reasons for me needing more food? Rather than it being like a knee-jerk reaction and just eating more because it's there. So it will also help build the nutritional discipline, as well as obviously like, having the confidence to, actually decide, no, do you know what, today I actually do need more food. So what are these situations when you might want a higher calorie day or a lower calorie day? So you might want a higher calorie day for times that you want a bit more flexibility. So an unplanned meal out, obviously period cravings, post-work drinks, surprise office cake. So those are more like the psychological side of things, or, I guess they're not really necessarily based around the fact that you actually need more fuel. These are more sort of, like psychological, knowing that you've got wider psychological goalposts to work with, so that you don't feel like you're restricted, you don't feel like you have to say no. There are also times when your body actually will need more fuel. So for instance, like I've got a couple of clients at the moment who are doing like long distance run training. If you're doing like a 10, 11K, obviously you're going to need more fuel to get you through that. Weight training days in general, this is not because you burn more calories, it's because your muscles require more energy to lift heavy. So if you want to be able to continuously PB on all of your exercises, get more reps, increase the weight, your muscles are going to have a greater energy requirement than they are if you're not weight training. And it essentially is to help with performance. It's not because you're burning more calories, it is so that you're properly fueled for performance. And essentially that's kind of what the long distance run is as well. Like, you want to think about like fueling for performance. Same goes with like a longer shift at work. Like, I have a couple of clients who will occasionally go from doing 6-hour shifts, and sometimes they'll do 12-hour shifts. Now, like, you're still using your brain more, you're still probably being more active in a 12-hour shift than you would be, on a normal 8-hour day. So of course you're going to need more fuel. Like if you're on your feet for longer, if you're thinking more, if you're using your brain more, if you're being more active, you're going to need more fuel than you would if you were, sat at a desk for 8 hours for the day. So so those are, like if you've got a longer shift, I think I've got, like, for instance, my client Jazz, she had a longer shift at work the other day. It was like a Tuesday and a Thursday, so we just said, like, this is a really good day that you might want to obviously give yourself a bit more fuel, whether you use that as snacks or whether you use that as like slightly bigger meals just to tide you over in between meals. It was a wise decision to eat more food on those days. A longer day traveling, so like, I know, like, traveling is kind of one of those things where you're like, I'm sat down, so like I don't like necessarily need more food. But especially if you've got like an early flight, you've been up for longer, and therefore, like, obviously you burn more calories when you're up than you do when you're asleep. So, a long day traveling, you are going to need more fuel. You've been on the go more. It's mentally taxing. It's emotionally taxing. If you are doing like a long stint of like a long day in the car, like you might, providing you're obviously sandwiching that with some exercise in the day, like you might want to fuel yourself a little bit more. After a night of poor sleep, so we all know that we get intense cravings for sugar and stuff after a night of poor sleep. It makes complete sense that happens because our body is craving energy. So rather than, like, obviously increase the amount of snacks you're having, it makes sense to have bigger meals. And therefore, if your body is lacking on energy and you get energy from food, it makes sense to eat more food to help you feel less tired. Definitely would recommend doing that on a day when you've had less sleep. And then if you're hungrier than normal, like, these things happen. Like, there are always going to be days where you're going to be slightly hungrier than normal, whether that's because you didn't have time to make a really filling breakfast, whether you've just been moving more. Like, if you're hungrier than normal and it's not, just emotional hunger, or even if it is sometimes emotional hunger, like, again, it's giving you that safety net so you can honour your hunger. Because I think sometimes, like, especially when you're in a fat loss phase, you kind of think, like, you have to be hungry and you have to ignore the hunger. Like, that is not the case. Like, if you're hungry, you're hungry. And if you're hungry, like, you should eat, because that's what you'll do going forwards. And if you can eat when you're hungry in a controlled manner, like, that is obviously going to set you up, for success for the rest of your life. So those are the high calorie days. When would you might want to use a low calorie day? So kind of the opposite, really, of all the days you want to have a high calorie day. So days that you don't feel hungry. So whether that's recovering from sickness or, you're just generally having a day that you don't have much appetite. Obviously rest days or cardio days, like, those are days where the energy, unless it's obviously like a long distance run, those are the days that the energy demands from your body are significantly decreased compared to obviously weight training. That, like, those 2 days you might want to have like a lower day. Some of my, like, OG clients might recall a time when we used to do like training day, rest day calories. That's probably a day that you would want to have a lower calorie day, or just days with less physical activity on the whole. Like, if you do have a long car journey and you're not going to have time to go to the gym or anything like that, like, if you're not going to be moving around as much, then sure, like, eat less food. It makes complete sense. If you're only going to do like 2,000 steps that day, it does make complete sense to eat less food. So but I hope this will make sense. If anyone has any questions about calorie ranges, just let me know. Okay, so you guys might have just seen my calorie ranges tutorial. If you haven't, definitely go and check that out. But I'm going to just talk through, like, how you would actively change your calories yourself based on, like, your fueling or flexibility needs. So open up MyFitnessPal, you go to your goals. Obviously you've got an idea of what your calorie range is going to be in your head, or you've got it written down. So there's 2 ways of doing this. If you don't have the premium version, it's going to be a little bit more tricky. But for instance, what I would probably do is just say, just change it on that day. And then just make sure you kind of change it back. So let's say, for instance, today, I know I've got a really heavy leg session, and I've got a really long day at work. So I know I'm going to need slightly more fuel. So, the main place that you would obviously get like the increase in calories from is going to be carbs, right? Because carbs is, obviously the main source of energy. So I know that like the high end of my range is like 1900, so I'm going to go all the way up to that range. So it's literally just a case of like changing the, or if it makes you do it in percentages, it's just a case of like changing the, oh no, that's so sad, I can't do that now. Oh, it's done me over. Okay, so it's going to be a case of, okay, no, fine. It's just going to be a case of writing down your calorie goal in the little box here and then adjusting the percentages. Obviously, don't touch your protein. But I know that I like having slightly higher fats as well, so I am going to increase my fats. But I'm just going to take my calories up to around 1900 or as close to 1900 as I can get them. Yeah, I'll keep it at that. Obviously, if I don't use my fat goal, like all of it, that's fine. If I do prioritize having more carbs, that's fine. As long as I'm hitting my protein and my calorie goal, like it doesn't really matter. So that's how I do it. If you have the premium version, what I would do is go in, press the add, I can't do it, but go in and press the add daily goal. Look at your week and say like, right, okay, I know I've got a big leg session on Tuesday, I've got a long day at work on Wednesday, and then I've got another leg session on Friday. So it would just be a case of making the Tuesday and Tuesday and Thursday you could do like, if you've been at the bottom end of your range, you could do like the mid of your range. And then if you've got a long day at work, you could make that like the higher end of your range. Remember, obviously, like it is a range. So, let's say that my range is like 1600. So my calories were at the bottom of my range. So 1600 to 1900 calories. Let's say, for instance, all of my other days I'm going to have as rest days. And I'm not going to have time to go out and do any cardio. So I'm just going to keep my calories at the bottom end of my range. But then let's say, I don't know, I know I'm coming on my period tomorrow, so I know I'm going to want slightly more food. So I'm just going to increase it slightly to 1700, just for a bit of flexibility. Or let's say, for instance, I've tracked all of my food and I don't know, like at last minute, I do want some like, post-dinner popcorn as a snack. Like I literally all I need to do is like just adjust this by like 20 grams essentially, and maybe that by 5, and suddenly all I've done is just factor in my my popcorn. Also the benefit is that if you do like go over by like 50 calories, you don't necessarily need to adjust your calories to accommodate that, because you've got your range. As long as you don't go above 1900 calories, like it's going to be fine. So for those like more unplanned, spontaneous days where you do eat more food, like, you don't need to adjust. You can just, just make sure that you haven't gone over, the high end of your calorie range, if that makes sense. So yeah, I hope this will make sense.